The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years. 12 great species had come together to form the galactic Concord. They traded with each other, they shared knowledge, they built great stations in the spaces between stars. War was something that existed only in old stories and history files. The Yori were beings made of living crystal. They glowed with soft colors that changed with their moods. They had lived for millions of years and considered themselves the wisest of all species. The Mindwavers could speak directly into the thoughts of others. They wore flowing robes and spent their days in deep meditation. The Sithal were ancient reptiles with scales of deep green and gold. They moved slowly and thought even slower, but their memories stretched back further than any other race. These were the elder species. They had forgotten why anyone would want to. Then there were the humans. Humanity had joined the Concord only 40 years ago. To the elder species, this was less than the blink of an eye. Humans live short lives, rarely more than 100 years. They were emotional and loud. They laughed too much. They cried openly. They played strange games where they pretended to fight each other for fun. The Yori ambassador had once watched a human sporting event called football. He had been deeply confused. They are not actually angry with each other, he had asked his human guide. This violence is recreational. The guide had laughed and slapped the ambassador on his crystalline shoulder. It's just a game, friend. We love games. The elder species did not understand humans, but they tolerated them. After all, they were young. They would learn to be calm and peaceful like everyone else. It would just take time. Then the breath came. The VH Dominion had grown in the far reaches of the galaxy, beyond the light of the Concord's knowledge. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black pools that showed no emotion. They had built their empire through conquest and blood. For 10,000 years they had taken what they wanted. They had never met a species they could not crush. The first warning came when 2 conquered border worlds went silent. The colonies on Tereth 4 and New Harmony stopped responding to communications. Ships were sent to investigate. They never returned. When a Concord scout finally managed to escape and bring back images, the High Council fell into shocked silence. Both worlds had been burned. Cities that had stood for centuries were now black ash. Millions of beings were dead. The breath had left no survivors. They had simply destroyed. High Counselor Vithana of the Sethal called an emergency summit. Representatives from all 12 species gathered on the great station of Central Harmony. The chamber was designed to hold thousands, and it was full. Fear hung in the air like a fog. Admiral Alina Vasquez stood in the human section with her officers. She was a woman of 53 years with gray in her black hair and lines on her face that told of many hard decisions. She commanded Earth's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, 12 warships that the Concord considered dangerously aggressive just for existing. We must seek dialogue, the Yori High Speaker was saying. His crystals flickered with pale blue, the color of desperate hope. VHTH must have reasons. All beings have reasons. We can find common ground. They burned children, Admiral Vasquez said quietly to her aide, Commander James Okonkwo. There is no common ground with that. The Mindwaver delegation was suggesting that perhaps they could calm the breath through telepathic intervention, the Sithal were arguing that waiting and observing was the wisest course. Perhaps the breath would be satisfied with what they had taken. They won't stop, Akono said. He was a tall man from Nigeria with a shaved head and kind eyes that had seen too much. He was also the fleet historian, a man who had studied every war in human history. Predators don't stop when they taste blood, they just get hungrier. The debate went on for hours, then it went on for days. The elder species talked about peace and understanding and the nature of violence. They discussed the philosophical implications of defensive action. They formed committees to study the problem while they talked. The Verith Armada advanced. 5 more colonies fell, then 20. Admiral Vasquez requested permission to engage the enemy. Her request was buried in procedural discussions about the proper protocols for military action. Concord had no military. They had never needed one. On the 12th day of the summit, a breath message drone arrived at Central Harmony. It carried a simple recording, images of the destroyed colonies followed by a star map showing the path to the Concord's core worlds. The message required no translation. The breath were coming. Nothing would stop them. The chamber erupted in panic. It was then that High Counselor Vienna, ancient and slow and desperate, turned to the human delegation. Your species, he said, his voice heavy with reluctance, has maintained military forces. You practice combat. Perhaps you could handle this matter while we continue to seek peaceful solutions. Admiral Vasquez understood what was happening. The elder species were not asking for help. They were pushing a problem onto the strange, violent young species in the hope that it would go away. If the humans failed, well, at least the Concord would have tried something. She looked at Akongo. He nodded slowly. How many ships do they have? She asked. The authority pulled up the latest intelligence. Our scouts estimate over 2,000 warships, Admiral. Fully armed, experienced crews. And how many ships can the Concord provide? Silence. Then reluctantly, we have 47 vessels that could potentially be converted for defensive purposes. Scientific ships, transport carriers. They are not designed for conflict. 47 ships that had never fired a weapon. 12 human warships against 2,000 breath killers. Admiral Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Then we better get started, she said. Send me everything you have on the breath, their history, their culture, their myths and legends. Everything. The Yori was confused. Why would their stories matter? Because everyone is afraid of something, Vasquez replied, and we're going to find out what scares them. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her officers following. Behind her, the elder species watched in silence. They did not understand what they had just unleashed, but they would. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and looked at the fleet she had been given. 12 human warships floated in perfect formation, their gray hulls bristling with weapons. Around them, scattered like confused sheep, were the 47 Allied vessels. The Allied ships were beautiful. The Yori cruiser sparkled like a jewel in the starlight. The Mindwaver meditation barge was a graceful curve of silver and white. The Sithal observation platform was covered in growing plants and artistic sculptures. None of them had weapons. None of them had armor. None of them had ever been in a fight. We have 3 weeks before the breath reached the Kepler. Narrows, said Commander Okonkwo. Studying the tactical display, that's our best defensive position. If we're going to stop them, it has to be there. Then we have 3 weeks to turn scientists and diplomats into warriors, start the training. What followed would become legend across the galaxy. Human officers boarded every Allied ship. They came with training programs in battle simulations. They came with patience and determination. They came with something that the elder species found deeply unsettling: experience. On the Yori cruiser, a human lieutenant named Saracen tried to explain basic tactical movement. The Yori captain, being called Crystalline Dawn, was horrified. You want us to hide? Dawn asked, his crystals flashing angry red. To lurk in the darkness and strike without warning. This is deception. This is dishonor. This is survival. Chen replied calmly. The breath have 2,000 ships. We have 59. We cannot meet them in open battle. We have to be smart, but such tactics are primitive. They are what animals do. Shen smiled. Captain, my ancestors survived on a planet full of things that wanted to eat them. They learned to be smart because the alternative was extinction. That's not primitive, that's wisdom. On the Mindweaver meditation barge, a human gunnery sergeant named Marcus Webb was trying to teach basic weapons operation. The Mindweavers refused to touch the controls. We are beings of thought and peace, their leader said. Through telepathy, we do not cause harm to others. It is against our nature. Webb sat down across from them. He was a big man with scars on his arms and a gentle voice. Let me tell you a story, he said. When I was young, my sister was attacked by a criminal. I found them and I stopped the attack. I hurt the criminal badly. I had never hurt anyone before. It was terrible. The Mindweavers stirred uncomfortably. But here's what I learned, Webb continued. Sometimes causing harm to one being is the only way to protect others. My sister is alive because I was willing to do something terrible. The breath are coming to kill millions of innocent people if we don't stop them. Who will? The Mindweavers were silent for a long time. Then slowly their leader reached out and touched the weapons console. Day after day, the training continued. Human officers taught the Allied crews how to fight, but more than that, they taught them how to think like fighters. Meanwhile, Commander Okonkwo and his intelligence team were doing something even more important. They were studying the Vrath. Every predator has a predator, Okonkwo explained to Admiral Vasquez during a late-night briefing. The VTH have conquered hundreds of species. They believe they are invincible, but look at their history. He pulled up ancient records, some of them millions of years old. Before they became conquerors, the Vreth were prey. Their home world had massive predators called the Kethar, giant creatures with claws and teeth that hunted the breath for food. So they're afraid of being hunted, Vasquez said slowly. Exactly. They conquered the galaxy to prove they were no longer prey, but deep in their psychology, in their oldest stories and nightmares, the fear is still there. They're afraid of something that hunts them in the darkness, something that won't stop, something patient and relentless. Vasquez nodded. We can use that. There's more. Okono continued. The Vreth have never fought humans before. They've studied our communications, our technology, our public records, but they haven't studied our history. They don't know what we are. What are we, James? Akono pulled up an image of ancient Earth, humans in animal skins carrying simple spears chasing a massive beast. Across an open plain, we are persistence predators, he said, on our home world we hunted by chasing prey. Until it collapsed from exhaustion, we didn't have the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws, we had patience, we had endurance, we followed our prey for days, never stopping, never resting, until the prey simply gave up and died. You want to make the breath feel like prey. I want to remind them what it feels like to be hunted, to be chased, to know that no matter how far they run, something is always following. Vasquez was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. It was the same unsettling smile she had shown at the conquered summit. Prepare the fleet, she ordered. We're going to teach the VH a lesson they'll never forget. 3 weeks later, the combined fleet arrived at the Kepler Narrows. The Vreth Armada was 1 day behind them, 2,000 ships against 59. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Vasquez reviewed her battle plans. They were complex and deceptive. They relied on tricks and traps and psychological warfare. They were nothing like the straightforward battles the elder species had expected. Captain Crystalline Dawn of the Authority cruiser contacted her on a private channel. Admiral, my crew is ready, but I must confess I still do not fully understand your strategy. It seems dishonorable. Captain, let me ask you something. If a murderer was coming to kill your family, would you fight fair? I suppose I would. Do whatever was necessary. The breath have murdered millions. More will die if we don't stop them. Honor is a beautiful thing, Captain, but right now survival matters more. Dawn was silent, then his crystals shifted to a deep blue. I understand, Admiral. My crew will follow your orders. Vasquez closed the channel and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 2,000 breath ships were coming to destroy everything she loved. She thought about her home on Earth. She thought about her children and grandchildren. She thought about all the beings on all the worlds that were counting on her. All ships, she said, into the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Vasquez. The enemy will arrive tomorrow. They think they're predators. They think they're coming to hunt us. She paused. They're wrong. We're going to show them what a real predator looks like. All ships prepare for battle. Across the fleet, humans and aliens alike began their final preparations. In a few hours the battle would begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vreth Armada emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of angry insects. 2,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons, spread across the darkness in perfect formation. At their center, the massive command carrier of Supreme Commander Keth Vorin cast a shadow across the stars. Keith Vorin stood on his bridge, his forearms clasped behind his back. He was old for a breath, nearly 200 years, and he had led his fleet to victory in over 300 battles. He had conquered empires. He had crushed rebellions. He had never known defeat. Report, he ordered, his voice like grinding stones. The enemy fleet is positioned at the Narrows. His tactical officer replied. 59 vessels, 12 of them appear to be human military ships. Rest are converted civilian craft. It will be a slaughter. He ordered the advance. What happened next confused the breath completely. The coalition fleet turned and ran. Admiral Vasquez had been waiting for this moment, the moment when the VH saw their prey fleeing, the Moment when the predators tasted blood and began to chase. All ships execute. Retreat pattern Alpha, she ordered. Make it look good. Make it look. Scared, the coalition fleets scattered. In apparent panic, ships flew in random directions. Some seemed to struggle with engine problems, others broadcast distress signals on open channels. One Yori vessel even accidentally crashed into an asteroid and appeared to lose all power. Keith Voran watched with satisfaction. They run like the cowards they are. Pursue them, let none escape. The breath formation spread out. Individual ship captains racing to claim kills. Discipline began to break down as hunting instincts took over. The chase was on. For 2 days the coalition fled through the Kepler narrow system. They left behind debris fields and abandoned ships. They seemed to grow more desperate with each passing hour. On the second night, Keth Voran received word that the humans were broadcasting a message. It was a funeral song, sad and slow and ancient, a human tradition for honoring the dead. They mourned their fallen already. Keith V. Voran said they know they cannot win. Tomorrow we end this. He ordered his fleet to rest for a few hours before the final assault. The prey was cornered. There was no need to rush. He did not know that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. In the darkness between the stars, 12 human warships drifted in silence. Their engines were cold, their lights were off, their crews sat in the darkness, breathing slowly, waiting. This was called running silent. Human submarines had used this technique for centuries, hiding beneath the waves, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now their descendants used it in space. Admiral Vasquez floated on the bridge of the Defiance, her mag boots keeping her anchored to the deck. No artificial gravity, no heat, no power except for the most basic life support. For 18 hours, her crew had lived like ghosts. The breath had never encountered anything like this. Their sensors searched for engine signatures and heat patterns. They found nothing. As far as they knew, the human warships had fled with the rest of the coalition. All ships, Vasquez whispered into her calm. Time to target, 30 minutes. Weapons hot, engines on my mark. Across the silent darkness, 11 other captains acknowledged. They had trained for this. Now it was time. The Verith fleet was scattered across millions of kilometers, their formation broken by the chase. Their command carrier sat at the center, surrounded by only a thin screen of escorts. Kev Voran had spent most of his forces hunting the fleeing coalition ships. He had left himself exposed. At exactly midnight ship time, Admiral Vasquez gave the order. Mark 12 human warships powered up simultaneously, appearing on breath sensors like demons, materializing from nothing. They were already inside the breath formation. They were already within weapons range of the command carrier. At the same moment, the abandoned coalition ships came back to life. They had never been damaged. They had been playing dead. Another ancient human tactic used by soldiers and hunters throughout history. Lie still. Look helpless. Wait for the predator to come close, then strike. The Battle of Horizon's Edge had begun. The first volley of human missiles slammed into the breath command carrier before K. Voran even understood what was happening. Explosions tore through the massive ship. Secondary systems failed. Communications went dark for precious minutes. Were under attack. Tactical officer screamed. The humans. They were hiding. They were right next To us, Keverin roared orders, but his fleet was in chaos. Ships that had spread out to chase the coalition were too far away to help. The thin escort screen was being ripped apart by concentrated human fire, and then the psychological warfare began. Human ships broadcast a recording on all breath frequencies. It was an ancient sound from Earth, the howl of wolves. Dozens of wolves howling together. The sound of a pack closing in for the kill. To human ears it was haunting, to breath ears it was something worse. It was the sound of their oldest nightmares, the sound of the Kethar, the great predators of their home world who had hunted their ancestors for millennia. VTH crews froze at their stations. Some panicked and fired on their own ships. Others simply stopped. The ancient fear, buried for thousands of years, rose up from the depths of their minds and paralyzed them. The battle lasted 11 hours. The coalition lost 19 ships. Good beings from many species died in the darkness, giving their lives for a galaxy they barely knew. Their names would be carved in monuments across 100 worlds. The Vreth lost 342 ships, including 16 of their command vessels, including the escort fleet that was supposed to protect Kevorin. The Supreme Commander himself survived. His carrier was badly damaged, but it escaped into hyperspace with the remnants of his fleet. As he fled, he looked back at the battlefield and saw something that would haunt him forever. A human warship, its hull scarred and burning, flew through the wreckage, broadcasting another message. This one was not a howl, it was a simple phrase, repeated in the breath language: "We are still coming." Across the galactic conquered, news of the victory spread like wildfire. The elder species were shocked. They had expected the humans to die bravely and buy time for negotiations. Instead, the humans had won. They had won against impossible odds, using tactics that the conquered had never seen before. A new phrase entered the galactic vocabulary: fighting like humans. It meant using tricks and deception. It meant refusing to give up. It meant being willing to do whatever was necessary to win, but it was certainly respectful. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Vasquez sat in her captain's chair and read the casualty reports: 19 ships, over 3,000 lives. She knew the names of many of them personally. Commander Ayanquo approached her quietly. "Admiral, the Yori ambassador is requesting a meeting." Vasquez nodded and stood. The work was not done. The Breath had lost a battle, but they had not lost the war. Keith Vorin still had over 1,600 ships. He would be back, but for now, for this moment, humanity had proven something important. They had proven that when the galaxy needed someone to fight for them, there was only one species for the job. The humans were just getting started. Supreme Commander Kev Vorin stood in the medical bay of his damaged carrier and stared at the wall. His forearms hung at his sides. His black eyes saw nothing. For the first time in 200 years, he did not know what to do. 300 ships gone. He had never lost a battle. His ancestors had never lost a battle. The Breath Dominion had conquered the galaxy through strength and will and the certainty that they could never be defeated. And then the humans had appeared from nowhere and torn his fleet apart. His tactical officers gave him reports. They explained the human tactics, the hiding, the traps, the psychological attacks. They analyzed the wolf howls and concluded that humans had studied breath history and found their deepest fears. They researched us. One officer said nervously, they found out what we were afraid of and used it against us. He turned to face his officers and the rage in his eyes made them step back. Then we will research them, he growled, find out everything about these humans, their history, their wars, their weaknesses. If they want to hunt, we will show them what it means to be prey. But it was already too late. Admiral Vasquez did not wait for the breath to recover. While Keth Voran was still gathering his remaining fleet, human ships were already moving. The human strategy was simple but brutal. They did not have enough ships for a direct fight with the remaining breath armada, so they would not fight directly. Instead, they would do what humans had done for millions of years. They would hunt. Human ships formed into small groups called wolf packs. Each pack had 3 or 4 vessels, fast and deadly. They spread across the space between the Kepler Narrows and Vref territory, and they began to hunt. First target was supply lines. Armies need food, ships need fuel, soldiers need medicine and ammunition. Kevorans fleet had traveled far from home, and everything they needed had to come from V-space through vulnerable supply convoys. The Wolfpacks found these convoys and destroyed them without mercy. Captain Chen, the same officer who had trained the Aetheri, led the first raid. Her pack of 4 ships ambushed a rest supply convoy carrying fuel cells for a 100 warships. The convoy had 10 escort vessels. Shen's pack destroyed all of them in 8 minutes. Leave 1 ship damaged but alive, she ordered as the last escort tried to flee. Let them tell the others what happened. Survivor limped back to Kevoran with a message. It was a human voice speaking. In heavily accented breath, we see you. We follow you. We will never stop. Night after night, breath supply ships vanished. Fuel became scarce. Food became scarce. Medical supplies ran out completely. Soldiers who were wounded could not be treated. Engines that broke down could not be repaired. And the humans kept hunting. They attacked from the darkness using the same silent running technique that had worked at Horizon's edge. They appeared, struck hard, and vanished before the VHT could respond. Every time Keth Voran sent ships to protect a convoy, the humans simply attacked somewhere else. They were everywhere. They were nowhere. They could not be caught. Kaz Voran began to lose sleep. Then the psychological warfare intensified. Human ships began broadcasting messages on breath military frequencies, not threats. Something worse, they broadcast children's songs, ancient VHT lullabies that mothers sang to their young, songs about being safe from the night, songs about hiding from the Cathar. The humans had found recordings in breath cultural archives and played them across the darkness of space to breath soldiers who had not slept in days, who had watched their comrades die in fire and terror, who had started to jump at shadows. These songs were not comforting. They were reminders that something was out there, something was watching, something was always hunting. Soldiers began to see threats everywhere. Crews turned on each other. In paranoid fights, officers refused to leave their bridges, convinced that the humans would attack the moment they looked away. Keferin ordered his communications officers to block the broadcasts. It did not help. The humans found other frequencies. They even sent physical drones that played the songs outside breath ship holes. And always the same message at the end: we are still coming. Finally, Keth Voron made a decision born of desperation and rage. Enough games, he announced to his remaining commanders. We will not chase these human packs across space. We will go to the source. We will destroy their home world. We will burn Earth to ash. And then we will see how long they continue to hunt. His officers agreed eagerly. They needed victory. They needed to feel like predators again. And what better way than to destroy the human home? The Breath Armada, reduced to 1,800 ships, but still massive, began the long journey to Earth. They bypassed the conquered worlds. They ignored the remaining coalition forces. They had one target: the cradle of humanity. But Admiral Vasquez had anticipated this. They're running, she said when scouts reported the breath movement, running to Earth because they think it will end the war. Shouldn't we move to defend Earth? Commander Ayanquo asked. Vasquez shook her head. Earth can defend itself. We have defense platforms and home guard fleets. What we need to do is make sure the VH arrive exhausted, broken, and terrified. She pulled up a star map showing the path from the Kepler narrows to Earth. 6 systems, 12 days of travel, 12 days. She said, we're going to hunt them for every single one. What followed was the worst journey in VRE history. Wolfpacks did not stop. If anything, they intensified their attacks. Every time the Breath fleet dropped out of hyperspace to recharge their engines, humans were waiting. Every time they tried to rest, alarms screamed as missiles came out of the darkness. Keth Voron ordered his fleet to travel in tight formation for protection. The humans simply fired long-range weapons and retreated before the Breath could respond. He ordered his fastest ships to chase the humans. They vanished, then reappeared behind the fleet to attack the slow, damaged stragglers. He ordered complete communication silence to prevent the humans from tracking them. It did not matter. The humans found them anyway. By the 4th day, Breath soldiers were hallucinating from lack of sleep. By the 6th day, some ships had stopped responding to orders entirely. Their crews had simply given up. By the 9th day, Keth Voron finally understood what he was facing. He ordered his historians to study human military records. What they found made his blood run cold. Humans had evolved as persistent predators on their home world. They had hunted by chasing prey across vast distances, not fast chases. Slow ones, patient ones. They followed their prey for days, never stopping, never resting until the prey collapsed from exhaustion and terror. This was what they were doing to him. They were not trying to destroy his fleet in battle. They were trying to break it, to chase it until it could not fight anymore, to make his soldiers so tired and scared that they would simply give up. And it was working. By the time the Verith fleet arrived at Earth, only 400 ships could still fight effectively. The rest were damaged, out of fuel, or crewed by soldiers who had not slept in days. Kevoran looked at the blue planet floating in space, humanity's home, the birthplace of the creatures who had hunted him across 6 systems. He had come to destroy them, but as his sensors showed the human defense network and the ships rising to meet him, he realized the terrible truth. He had been the prey all along. The VH fleet emerged from hyperspace above Earth, and Supreme Commander Keth Voron felt his heart sink. Earth's defensive network was vast. Orbital platforms bristled with Weapons, hundreds of ships formed a wall of steel between the planet and the invaders, behind them the blue-green world spun peacefully, covered in clouds, and oceans and continents filled with billions of humans. But that was not what made Kevoran's blood run cold. Behind the human fleet, he saw other ships, Athor vessels, their crystal hulls reflecting Earth's sun, Mindweaver meditation barges now, armed with weapons that glowed with strange energy, Sethel observation platforms, their plant-covered surfaces, hiding missile launchers. Ships from 47 species had gathered to defend Earth. The Galactic Concord had come. They brought the entire galaxy. His tactical officer whispered. Kefor then stared at the assembled fleet. Many of the alien ships were small, some were clearly improvised civilian vessels, with weapons bolted onto them. A few were nothing more than cargo haulers. But they had come, species that had never fought a war had traveled across the stars to stand beside the humans. Why? A communication signal reached his bridge. It was Admiral Vasquez. Supreme Commander Keforan, she said calmly, you have traveled a long way. Your fleet is exhausted, your supplies are gone. You have 400 ships that can fight. We have over 800. Keith Voran said nothing. She was right about everything. I am offering you one chance to surrender, Vasquez continued. Turn your ships around, return to Vref space, never threaten the Concord again. If you do this, I give you my word that your soldiers will not be harmed. Keith Voran found his voice. When Vasquez spoke again, her voice was cold as the space between stars. Then we will end this here, and when we are done, we will hunt down every breath ship that ever threatened this galaxy. We will follow you to your home world. We will chase you until there is nowhere left to run. We are very good at that. Keith Voran looked at his officers. He saw fear in their eyes, exhaustion, desperation. They had followed him across the galaxy, and now they wanted to go home, but his pride would not let him surrender, not to these small, short-lived creatures who had humiliated him at Horizon's edge and hunted him across 6 systems. He would die before he bent his knee to humans. All ships, he ordered. Prepare for battle. The Battle of Saul lasted 6 hours. It was not like the running fights and ambushes of the past weeks. This was a direct confrontation, fleet against fleet, weapon against weapon, the kind of battle Keith Voran had fought and won hundreds of times before, but his fleet was broken. His soldiers were exhausted, and the humans had been waiting. Human warships led the charge, their guns blazing with fury. Behind them came the Allied vessels fighting alongside humanity for the first time in history. Yari ships used their crystalline structures to refract enemy weapons. Fire, Mindweaver vessels broadcast psychic interference that confused breath targeting systems. Even the peaceful Sithel fought their ancient observation platforms, raining missiles on the enemy. The Vreth fought back with all the strength they had left. Keith V. Voran commanded from his bridge, directing fire, trying to find some weakness in the human formation. But there was no weakness, only determination, only the will to protect their home. Ship after ship fell on both sides. The darkness filled with fire and wreckage. Heroes died in silence, their names known only to their families and friends, and slowly, inevitably, the breath began to lose. When half his fleet was destroyed, Ketheron made a final decision. He ordered his remaining ships to concentrate all fire on the human, command vessel if he was going to die. He would take Admiral Vasquez with him. The VTH flagship launched every weapon it had at the Defiance. The human ship shuddered under the attack. Its shields failed, its hull breached in a dozen places. For a moment it seemed like the Verith might claim one final victory. Then the Defiance fired back. A single shot, perfectly aimed, struck the Verith flagship's main reactor. Kev Voron had just enough time to understand what was happening. Then his ship exploded and the supreme commander of the Breath Dominion died in fire without their leader. The remaining Breath ship surrendered within the hour. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos was part of the Marine team that boarded the last Breath vessel. Her brother had died at Horizon's Edge, killed when his ship was overwhelmed by enemy fire. She had carried his memory with her across 6 systems and 12 days of hunting. The final ship was a battle cruiser, its crew too tired to fight anymore. Santos and her team moved through the corridors, accepting surrenders, securing weapons. The Vret soldiers looked at them with haunted eyes. They had been the hunters. They had conquered galaxies. Now they were defeated by a species they had considered primitive. In the battle cruiser's command center, Santos found the ship's captain. He was an old Breath with gray scales and clouded eyes. He had served in the Dominion's fleet for over 100 years. Why? He asked as Santos took his surrender. Why did you fight so hard? We offered your conquered a chance to negotiate. We could have had peace. Santos thought about her brother, about the burning colonies, about the millions of innocent beings who had died because the Verith believed they could take whatever they wanted. We know, she said, we chose this. Instead, the war ended with the Vrees surrender. In the weeks that followed, peace negotiations began. The Vreth Dominion, humbled and broken, agreed to withdraw from all conquered space. They agreed to release the prisoners they had taken. They agreed to pay reparations for the worlds they had destroyed. They agreed, most importantly, to never attack the galactic conquered again. Conquered itself changed. For 3,000 years, it had been a peaceful alliance, content to avoid conflict. Now it established a permanent military force led by humans, but including ships and soldiers from all 47 species. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Peace was precious, but it had to be protected, and sometimes protection required warriors. A year after the war, the Yori ambassador gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. We thought humans were young and reckless, he said, his crystals glowing with colors that conveyed respect and wonder. We thought they were primitive because they fought games and simulated war. We were wrong. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of the conquered. Humans are ancient in ways we never understood. They carry the wisdom of survivors. Their ancestors faced predators that should have destroyed them, and they learned to be stronger. They learned to be patient. They learned to never stop hunting until the hunt was done. We are grateful that they chose to protect us, and we are wise enough to remain their friends. On Earth, in a small cemetery in Sao Paulo, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stood before her brother's grave. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Birds sang in the trees nearby. She had survived the war. She had helped save the galaxy. But standing here, looking at the simple stone that marked where her brother rested. She did not feel like a hero. She felt tired, she felt sad, she felt like she wanted the fighting to be over. Forever, we did it, she said softly. We proved to the galaxy that humanity can protect them. I hope it was worth it. The stone did not answer, but somewhere Maria believed her brother was at peace. She left the flower she had brought and walked back to her car. Tomorrow she would return to duty. Galaxy was at peace, but someone had to keep watch. Someone had to make sure that peace lasted. Humanity had not asked to be the galaxy's ultimate predator, but when the galaxy needed protection, humans had answered, and they would always answer because that was who they were. That was who they had always been. The hunters, the protectors, the species that never stopped fighting for what they loved. Maria Santos drove home through the quiet streets of Sao Paulo, and she thought about the future where humanity stood as the shield of the galaxy, a future where the stars were full of friends instead of enemies. It was a good future, and she would do whatever was necessary to protect